remembered for making some great music, for being one of the greatest guitarists who's ever lived.
It's really rare to have great success in the amount of bands that Eric Clapton did. It's not a normal thing at all.
He did do a tremendous amount to promote the blues and get recognition for a lot of the blues artists.
Eric Clapton was born in 1945 in the town of Ripley, Surrey. His father was a Canadian soldier who had been stationed in the UK, but had to return to his wife in Canada as the Second World War closed. With his father missing, Clapton was brought up by his grandparents, who acted as his parents, whilst his young mother pretended to be his sister. He did not find out the truth until he was 9.
Eric Clapton had a very confused upbringing. His mother, whose maiden name was Clapton, was someone he thought was his sister, and he was brought up by his grandparents, including his step-granddad, whose surname was Clapp.
I think Clapton had a really difficult childhood and upbringing. He had extreme kind of loneliness and kind of confusion from a young age. He was brought up by his grandparents, believing they were his parents. Then he never actually met his father. And I think that had a profound effect.
Clapton found solace in his unusual childhood in American 50s rock and roll that had exploded in the UK. And although artists like Chuck Berry and Buddy Holly made an impact, it was blues artists like Freddie King, Buddy Guy and B.B. King that would be the biggest influence on the developing guitar player.
I think what is important is how influential the blues was on that generation of musicians. It's a fascinating kind of grouping of bands who all kind of grew up around Surrey. You know, Clapton is from Ripley in Surrey. Jeff Beck's from Wallington, Jimmy Page was brought up in Epsom. I think it's a kind of cross-pollination of music shared between like-minded souls.
When he was growing up, the blues were really the only sort of music for alternative kids to connect with. So the fact that a kid from London connected with the blues is not unusual in itself. What is unusual in Eric Clapton's case is how he connected and how deeply he connected with the blues.
The greatest influence of all, though, was the legendary Robert Johnson, whom Clapton would call the most important blues singer who ever lived, and to whom he would dedicate an entire album much later in his career.
There are these kind of very vivid stories that you hear, the Stones or Page or Beck leave school, get on a number 73 bus, go round to someone's house who they'd heard had got a copy of a Robert Johnson record or a Blind Willie Dixon record or whoever. So I think to the early impressionable Clapton, it's inevitable that Johnson would be prominent in his journeys into blues.
He's quoted himself that the aspect of Robert Johnson which got through to him was the fact that Robert Johnson seemed to be singing and speaking from the soul. It was the sheer intensity of Robert Johnson's music, not the man, not the myth, not that selling his soul to the devil at the crossroads and all that nonsense. It was simply that this music spoke to him like no other music would for the rest of his life.